How secure is the world's supply of silver? To answer that question, we can take a look at the world's top 10 silver producers and try to determine on an individual basis how secure each country's silver production really is. One thing we've already witnessed this year is that when a major producer of a commodity is shut out from global markets, whether that be by warfare, sanctions, or social unrest, the price of that commodity has the potential to skyrocket. Could this happen with silver? Let's take a look. Okay, so we've got this list from Investopedia, and this was updated on August 11th, so just a few days ago, about the top 10 countries by silver production. Now, this is a reverse list, so I'm going to scroll all the way to the bottom, and we're going to start at number 1, which is Mexico. So Mexico is the world's biggest producer of silver, producing 5,600 metric tons last year, so that's quite a bit of silver. But how secure is that supply of silver? Well, if you've been watching the news, you've seen that lately Mexico has been beset by cartel violence. The government there cracking down on some of the cartel leadership, and as a result, people have been getting shot in the street. The cartels have been lighting vehicles in the street, and this is a serious problem there. These cartels are paramilitary or almost military groups, and it doesn't seem like there's a lot of political will in Mexico to combat them in a serious way. But should the government decide to crack down like they have in recent weeks and months, then there is the potential for major disruptions to the economy in Mexico, major disruptions to day-to-day life, and that could mean that less silver will be getting produced. So not coming from the most geopolitically stable area in the world, the largest producer of silver. Next up is China. Now, I don't think I need to tell you why the silver produced by China could be threatened, could be cut off from the world supply. They make 3,400 tons of silver there every year, or at least that's what they produced last year. And we just got this warning from the Chinese ambassador, warning that consequences could be more severe if we continue to sell arms to Taiwan, if more politicians visit there. You know, the recent visit from Nancy Pelosi, the Speaker of the House, putting U.S.-China relations in a very precipitous position. It seems like it's only a matter of time before this Taiwan-China thing becomes a hot war, a hot conflict, whether it'll be this year or 10 years from now. Eventually, it is highly possible that those 3,400 metric tons of silver could be cut off from global supplies, whether that be because China is withholding them for themselves or because they are cut off from the market by sanctions. Although, sanctioning metals, I don't think is going to have quite the same effect that, say, China just deciding they're going to keep all of their silver for themselves would have. And I'm going to talk more about that in just a few minutes. But next, we've got Peru in the number 3 spot. So they produced 3,000 metric tons of silver last year, and that is down from 4,160 metric tons in 2018. That was due to the COVID-19 pandemic and the measures they took to try to control that, along with protests. And this is very important because you can see here that protests and economic instability and civil unrest can lead to a major decline in the production of a commodity like silver, down over 25% in 3 years. And the unrest in Peru continues. This is a Wikipedia article on the 2022 Peruvian protests. And, this is the sort of thing we're going to continue to see as the global economic situation declines. And these protests have been ongoing since 2017. So no real sign that the political situation in Peru is going to stabilize anytime soon. And if it gets worse, and that seems likely considering the fact that we're heading into this massive global inflationary depression or recession, and that means that this production could continue to fall, and they are a major producer. Now, Chile, in the number 4 spot, producing 1,600 metric tons, and it's largely the same story as in Peru. They have been experiencing social unrest for years, predating COVID, although COVID exacerbated those problems as inflation and wealth inequality and the standard of living are just declining for your average person there. But that is what we're going to see here as the global economy continues to deteriorate and social unrest around the world worsens. And that is going to harm things like production of silver. Now, number 5 on the list, Russia. I don't think I need to go into too much detail as to why the supply of silver from Russia could be threatened, although I believe there are already some sanctions by the West on importing silver produced in Russia, and so far that has not created a spike in the price of silver. Now, other metals that Russia produces, like palladium, following the invasion of Ukraine by Russia, we did see a spike in those metals, but it wasn't the same case for silver, really. Didn't see nearly as big of a gain in silver, and part of that, I think, is because Russia is only the number 5 producer, but also, this sanctioning of precious metals from Russia, it seems kind of weird to me because, Russia can still just sell those metals to countries that are not sanctioning them, and then if those countries refine or reprocess those metals and sell them onto the global market, it kind of makes me wonder how much effect sanctions will have on the price of silver. But it's still important to note that Russia is the number 5 producer because they produce a lot of this critical resource, 1,300 metric tons last year. And it's not so much that sanctions might drive the price of silver up, but if Russia decides to withhold this critical resource from global markets, that could drive prices up. And as we see this schism between East and West, the stuff that Zoltan Pasar predicted in that letter he wrote back in March, Bretton Woods 3, the countries that control the real money, the gold and the silver, they're going to have an advantage on the economic front. And so this is still a risk to global silver supplies. Poland, they're the number 6 producer, producing 1,300 metric tons of silver last year, and they're a NATO member, fully integrated into the EU, so likely this silver will continue to be available to the West, but there are some other threats to Poland's production right now. We've got the skyrocketing cost of energy and electricity in Europe as a result of the natural gas situation there and the effects of the sanctions that they've imposed, driving the cost of energy way up. And so that could absolutely cause Poland to cease the production of silver. That could cause their cost of production to skyrocket, and it may just not be profitable at today's silver prices for Poland to continue to produce this metal as their input costs in terms of energy skyrocket and go much, much higher. So we could see this portion of world silver supply eliminated for that reason. Now, number 7 on the list, that's Australia. They have relatively stable silver production levels, 1,300 metric tons last year, and it also has major reserves. Now, Australia seems like probably a safe place. They are likely to continue to produce their silver. The Perth Mint should have a nice supply of silver to make all those coins and bars. But got to keep in mind, if we do see that war in the Pacific over Taiwan between the U.S. and China, or however that plays out, Australia is sort of in a geographically vulnerable location. And if they get into conflict with China, which there has been some, language between the two of them over the past couple years that has been a bit less than friendly, they're not going to fare too well in that conflict unless there's major intervention by another power. And that's not to denigrate Australia or their military or anything like that, but it's a nation of 25 million people versus a nation of 1.4 billion people. So keep that in mind, that there are some geopolitical risks over there in the Pacific, and that would include Australia. Now, Bolivia, they're number 8 on the list, producing 1,000 metric tons last year. And Bolivia is much the same situation that you see in the rest of Latin America. Protests. This is a story from just a couple days ago about coca farmers launching fireworks at the police during protests. And so, again, as the global economy continues to deteriorate, as the cost of living for people begins to rise even further, as people's economic condition declines, we are going to see continued unrest, and that can absolutely have an impact on silver production. Now, number 9, the United States, we made 1,000 metric tons of silver last year. And of course, this is going to continue to be available to those in the U.S., unless, of course, some kind of environmental regulation or something like that interferes, or the rising cost of energy. If we continue to see energy tick up, I know it's pulled back a little bit recently, but I expect that the trend of higher oil is going to be one that persists for a while yet. Unless the price of silver rises, it may become less and less profitable for miners to produce it. So we may see that number decline. And then finally, Argentina, number 10 on this list, producing 800 metric tons of silver in 2021. And Argentina, they recently said that they want to join the BRICS nations. So I think we know what side they are on in terms of the conflict between East and West. And so while they are likely to continue producing their silver. They are experiencing high levels of inflation there. I think last I checked, it was about 7% month over month. So, the possibility of unrest is high there. And if push comes to shove and the East and the West are duking it out and we've got paper currency and they have resource-based currency, Argentina's silver, I think we know where that is going to be committed. So that covers it for the top 10 producers. You see, there is the potential for some disruption to global silver supplies when we go over this list. And let me know what you think. Is the price of silver potentially going to spike if some of this silver gets pulled from the market? How likely do you think that is? Is there anything I missed? Anything you can think of regarding any of these producers that could throw a major wrench in the gears of silver production worldwide? Let me know what you think in the comments below. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, everybody, and I will catch you next time. Smart Silver Stacker, out.